He pushed the resignation papers across the desk and calmly laid out my options. Either I take the money and leave quietly, or they terminate me for cause and destroy my niece's career along the way. The auditor who had pretended to be impartial just a week ago now stood there waiting for me to sign my own death sentence. Before we continue and find out how it all began, please subscribe and leave a like. We truly love to read your comments below. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, third week of September, when the air conditioning in Building C was broken again and everyone was irritable. I had been at my desk since 7:30 reviewing budget allocations for the county transit expansion project, the kind of work that required absolute focus and a tolerance for spreadsheets that most people lacked. I was good at it. I had spent 11 years building a reputation as someone who could find the needle in the haystack, the discrepancy that everyone else missed, the solution that kept projects on track and auditors satisfied. The message was brief and formal. It informed me that the Office of Inspector General had received an anonymous complaint regarding procedural irregularities in the Regional Development and Grants Division. The complaint specifically related to expenditure approvals processed under my authorization code during the previous fiscal year. An internal audit would commence immediately. I was instructed to preserve all documentation, refrain from discussing the matter with colleagues, and make myself available for an initial interview scheduled for Thursday at 2 in the afternoon. I read it twice. The language was dry and bureaucratic, the kind of text designed to communicate facts without emotion, but something about it felt wrong. Anonymous complaint. Expenditure approvals. My authorization code. I printed the email and placed it in a folder. Then I opened the financial management system and began pulling up records. I worked methodically, starting with the largest expenditures and moving down: transit equipment purchases, vendor contracts, consulting fees, emergency repairs. Everything looked correct. Every approval had my digital signature, time-stamped and linked to the corresponding purchase order. I expanded the search parameters to include smaller transactions: office supplies, software licenses, training sessions. Still nothing unusual. I checked the dates: July, August, early September. I had been on medical leave for 2 weeks in late July after a minor surgical procedure. I had not been in the office. I had not accessed the system remotely. I scrolled to the transactions dated during those 2 weeks. There were 4 approvals under my code. 2 were for consulting services I did not recognize. The third was for equipment I had never ordered. The fourth was a fund transfer to a nonprofit organization I had never heard of. The amounts were not enormous, $15,000 here, $22,000 there, but they were significant enough to matter. I clicked on the first one and opened the attached documentation. The approval form bore my electronic signature. The date stamp showed July 23 at 9:47 in the morning. Someone had used my credentials. Someone had accessed the system with my authorization code and approved expenditures while I was out. That was not a procedural irregularity. That was fraud. And the documentation made it look like I had done it. I closed the window and sat back in my chair. The office around me hummed with its usual noise. I printed the transaction records and added them to the folder. Then I locked my computer and walked down the hall to the IT department. Marcus was there, hunched over a server rack with a screwdriver in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. He had been with the county for longer than I had. A quiet man in his 50s who understood the infrastructure better than anyone else. I waited until he noticed me. He looked up and nodded. "Morning, Claire. Something broke in?" I kept my voice quiet. "I need to ask you something off the record." He set down the screwdriver and straightened. "Okay." I chose my words carefully. If someone wanted to access the financial system using my credentials, what would they need? His expression shifted slightly. "Your username and password, and either your physical access card or a way to bypass two-factor authentication." He paused. "Could someone do that without me knowing?" I asked. "Depends. If they had your password and cloned your access card, yes. If they accessed it remotely, there would be logs." I felt the cold in my chest spread. I was at home recovering from surgery. I wasn't here. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. "Then someone else was using your credentials and your card. The system only logs the credential, not the person. If someone cloned your card and knew your password, the system would read it as you." He hesitated. Claire, if this is what I think it is, you need to report it. This is serious. I met his eyes. I already got flagged for an audit. Someone had cloned my access card. Someone had stolen my password. Someone had impersonated me in the system and created a trail of fraudulent approvals. And then someone had reported it. This was not opportunistic. This was planned. This was targeted. I sat down and opened my personal email on my phone. I drafted a message to myself with the transaction records attached and sent it. Then I forwarded the audit notification. I needed copies that existed outside the county network, somewhere they could not be deleted or altered. I thought about Marcus's advice. I needed a lawyer. I needed someone who understood employment law and public sector regulations. But lawyers were expensive, and I did not know if I could afford one if this turned into a prolonged fight. I thought about my niece. Lily worked in the same building, 2 floors down in the records and permits office. She was 26, bright and eager, still learning how the system worked. She had moved in with me a year ago after a bad breakup left her financially stranded. She paid minimal rent and helped with groceries. It was temporary, she said, just until she got back on her feet. I did not mind. I liked having someone else in the house. It made the silence less oppressive. But Lily worked for the county too. If this audit turned into something bigger, if they decided to make an example of me, she could be collateral damage. Guilt by association. A tainted connection. I had seen it happen before. I picked up my phone and typed a message to her. Can you come up to my office during lunch? Need to talk. Her reply came a minute later. Sure. Everything okay? I did not answer that. I put the phone down and stared at the folder on my desk. Everything was not okay. Everything was about to get much worse. And I had no idea who had access to my workspace. Who could have stolen my access card long enough to clone it? Who knew my password? I had never written it down. I changed it every 90 days as required. But passwords could be guessed or phished or extracted through social engineering. I thought about the people I worked with. Sandra, who sat near me and occasionally borrowed my stapler. Tom, the deputy director, who signed off on my performance reviews. Janet, who handled HR and had access to personnel files. None of them had a reason to destroy me. None of them had anything to gain. Unless this was not personal. Unless this was about something else. Lily arrived at 12:15. She was wearing a blue blouse and black slacks, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked young and hopeful, the way I must have looked when I started here. She sat down in the chair across from my desk and smiled. What's up? I closed the door and kept my voice low. I need to tell you something and I need you to stay calm. Lily leaned forward, her voice rising slightly. They can't seriously think you did this. You're the most careful person I know. I held up a hand. It doesn't matter what I did or didn't do. It matters what the evidence says. And right now, the evidence says I approved expenditures I shouldn't have. She bit her lip. So you prove you weren't here. You show them the medical records. She crossed her arms. What are you going to do? I kept my voice steady. I'm going to cooperate with the audit and document everything I can. I'm going to find out who did this. But I need you to be prepared. If this turns into something bigger, people are going to distance themselves from me. You might get questioned. You might get pressure to move out. Lily's expression hardened. I'm not leaving. You didn't do anything wrong. I felt something tighten in my throat. You have your own career to think about. If they decide to make me a scapegoat, being associated with me could hurt you. She met my eyes. You took me in when I had nowhere else to go. You helped me get this job. I'm not going to abandon you because some asshole is trying to frame you. I wanted to tell her that loyalty was admirable but dangerous. I wanted to tell her that institutions protected themselves, not individuals. But she was looking at me with absolute certainty, and I did not have the heart to crush it. Not yet. Okay, I said quietly. Just be careful. Don't talk about this with anyone at work. Don't defend me publicly. If someone asks, say you don't know anything. She nodded reluctantly. That's a lie. I kept my gaze level. It's protection. For both of us. She stood up and paused at the door. We're going to figure this out. I know we will. I watched her leave. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that truth and documentation and careful analysis would be enough to clear my name. But I had worked in bureaucracies long enough to know that the truth was often less important than the narrative. And right now, the narrative was being written by someone else. The interview room was on the 4th floor. A windowless space with gray walls and fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly sickly. I arrived at 1:55 on Thursday afternoon, carrying the folder I had prepared with transaction records, medical documentation, and a timeline of my whereabouts during the dates in question. The auditor was already there. A woman in her early 40s with short brown hair, and a navy suit that looked like it had been purchased specifically to communicate authority. She introduced herself as Rebecca Martins from the Office of Inspector General. Her handshake was firm and brief. She gestured to the chair across from her and opened a tablet without pleasantries. "Ms. Harding, thank you for making yourself available," she said, her tone professional and neutral. "I want to start by clarifying that this is a preliminary interview. You are not under formal accusation at this time. However, irregularities have been flagged in the expenditure approval process, and we need to understand the scope and origin of those irregularities. Do you understand?" I nodded. "I understand." She tapped the tablet. "I'm going to walk through several transactions that were processed under your authorization code between July 20th and August 2nd of this year. I need you to confirm whether you approved these expenditures and whether you recall the circumstances." She began reading from the list. A consulting contract for $22,000 with a firm called Redstone Advisory Group. I told her I had never heard of them. A purchase order for surveying equipment totaling $18,000 from a vendor I did not recognize. I told her I had not ordered it. A fund transfer to a nonprofit called the Midland Community Initiative for $15,000. I told her I had no knowledge of the organization. She did not react. She tilted her head slightly. "The system logs indicate that your credentials were used to approve these transactions. Your access card was swiped at the building entrance. Your authorization code was entered correctly. I had anticipated this. I didn't access the system remotely. If you check the IP logs, you'll see the transactions were processed from a workstation on the 3rd floor. I was at home. I can provide witness statements if necessary." Rebecca made another note. "We will verify that. However, the use of your credentials suggests either negligence in protecting your access information or active participation in the fraudulent approvals." She leaned back slightly. "That's a serious accusation. You're suggesting that a colleague engaged in identity theft and financial fraud." I walked back to my office in a daze. Suspended access. That meant I could not do my job. That meant the subject line read, "Temporary reassignment of responsibilities." I opened it. The message was brief. I spent the rest of the afternoon. She was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, her phone in her hands and her face pale. I set my bag down and sat across from her. "What happened?" She looked up. Her eyes were red. "Janet from HR called me into her office this afternoon. She asked me how long I'd been living with you. She asked if I had access to your work computer or your files. She asked if I'd ever noticed anything unusual about your financial habits." I felt the cold return to my chest. "What did you tell her?" Lily's voice shook slightly. "I told her I lived with you because I needed help after my breakup. I told her I didn't have access to your work files. I told her you were the most honest person I knew." I closed my eyes for a moment. They're building a case. They're looking for connections for anything that makes me look guilty. They want to know if you're involved or if you can corroborate their suspicions. Lily wiped her eyes. She made it sound like I was under investigation too. Like I was hiding something. I'm not hiding anything. I don't know anything about those transactions. I reached across the table and took her hand. "I know. But they don't care what you know. They care what they can use. If they can make it look like we were working together, it strengthens their case against me. If they can pressure you into saying something that contradicts my story, even accidentally, they'll use it." She pulled her hand back. "So what do I do? Do I lie? Do I refuse to talk to them?" I shook my head. "You tell the truth. You answer their questions honestly. You don't volunteer information and you don't speculate. If they ask you something you don't know, you say you don't know. You don't try to defend me. You don't try to fill in gaps. Her voice rose. That makes it sound like I'm abandoning you. I kept my tone calm. You're protecting yourself. That's not abandonment. That's survival. She stared at me. I don't want to survive if it means watching them destroy you. I felt something break inside me just a little. Lily, listen to me. This is going to get worse before it gets better. If you stay close to me, you're going to get pulled into it. I need you to stay out of it. I need you to keep your head down and do your job and let me handle this. She shook her head. I can't just do nothing. I stood up and walked to the window. The street outside was empty, the evening light fading into gray. You're not doing nothing. You're staying safe. That's what I need from you right now. She did not respond. I heard her chair scrape against the floor, and then the sound of her footsteps going upstairs. A door closed softly. I stood there for a long time watching the light drain from the sky. I thought about the interview with Rebecca Martins. I thought about the suspended access and the reassigned responsibilities. I thought about Janet questioning Lily. This was not an investigation. This was a demolition. Someone was systematically dismantling my credibility, my authority, and my support network. And they were doing it through official channels, using the rules and procedures I had always trusted to protect me. I needed to understand who was behind this. I needed to find the source. But every step I took to defend myself gave them more ammunition. Every question I asked made me look paranoid or guilty. I was trapped in a system designed to root out misconduct, and the system did not care whether the misconduct was real or fabricated. I thought about Marcus's advice. Document everything. I had started doing that, but documentation alone would not be enough. I needed something concrete. I needed proof that someone had cloned my access card, that someone had stolen my password, that someone had planned this. I needed a name. I went upstairs and knocked on Lily's door. She opened it after a moment. Her face was still pale, but she had stopped crying. I'm sorry, I said. I know this isn't fair. I know you want to help, but I need you to trust me. I need you to let me figure this out. She nodded slowly. Okay. But if it gets worse, if they come after you harder, I'm not going to stay silent. I did not argue. I just nodded and went to my own room. That night I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, turning over every interaction I had had in the past 6 months. Who had been near my desk? Who had access to the 3rd floor? Who had a reason to destroy me? The questions circled endlessly, and I had no answers. At 2 in the morning I gave up and went downstairs. I made coffee and opened my laptop. I logged into my personal email and started searching for anything I might have missed. Old messages from colleagues. Meeting notes. Performance reviews. I was looking for a pattern, a connection, something that would explain why someone had targeted me. And then I found it. An email from 3 months ago, sent by Tom, the deputy director. It was addressed to the senior leadership team, and I had been copied on it as a courtesy. The subject line read, Organizational Restructuring Proposal. I opened it. The email outlined a plan to consolidate the Regional Development and Grants Division with another department to improve efficiency and reduce overhead costs. The proposal included eliminating several mid-level management positions, including mine. My position was listed as redundant. The restructuring had been tabled during budget discussions, but it had not been abandoned. It was still under consideration. I sat back and stared at the screen. If my position was eliminated, someone else would take over my responsibilities. Someone else would control the budget approvals, the vendor contracts, the project oversight. Someone else would have the authority I had spent 11 years building. And if I were discredited first, if I were forced out under a cloud of suspicion, the restructuring would be easier to justify. No one would question the elimination of a position held by someone accused of financial misconduct. I thought about the fraudulent transactions. I thought about the anonymous complaint. I thought about the timing. Someone wanted me gone, and they had found a way to make it look justified. I closed the laptop and finished my coffee. The sky outside was starting to lighten, the first gray traces of dawn creeping over the rooftops. I had been awake for 24 hours, and I felt hollowed out, scraped clean of everything except a cold, hard determination. I did not know who had done this yet, but I knew why, and that meant I knew where to look. I went to work on Friday with a plan. It was not a good plan and it was not a safe plan, but it was the only one I had. If the restructuring proposal was the motive, then Tom was either directly involved or knew who was. I needed access to his communications, his calendar, his correspondence with the leadership team. But I no longer had clearance to view administrative files, and asking for access would raise immediate red flags. I needed to find another way in, something that would not leave a digital trail pointing back to me. I arrived at the office early, before most people, and went directly to the third floor. The workstations there were shared terminals used by interns and temporary staff, people who rotated in and out on short-term contracts. The computers were not assigned to specific individuals, which meant the access logs would show generic user IDs rather than my name. I sat down at one near the back corner, partially hidden behind a filing cabinet, and logged in using a guest account. The system allowed limited access to shared drives and internal email directories, nothing sensitive, but enough to search for metadata. I pulled up the organizational directory and navigated to Tom's profile. His calendar was marked private, but the system allowed me to see meeting titles and attendee lists without showing details. I scrolled back 3 months looking for patterns. Budget review meetings, leadership strategy sessions, performance evaluations, and then I saw it. A recurring meeting labeled Restructuring Working Group, scheduled every other Wednesday at 4 in the afternoon. The attendee list included Tom, 2 members of the county executive's office, and someone named Dr. Vivian Shaw from an external consulting firm. I opened a new tab and searched for Vivian Shaw. Her LinkedIn profile showed her as a senior partner at a management consulting company called Apex Organizational Solutions. Her specialty was government efficiency audits and workforce optimization. The company's website featured case studies of municipalities that had reduced payroll costs by 20 to 30% through strategic restructuring. I felt my stomach tighten. This was not just about eliminating my position. This was about dismantling the entire division and outsourcing the work to private contractors. My job was not redundant. It was profitable to remove. I took screenshots of the meeting schedule and Dr. Shaw's profile, saving them to a cloud drive that existed outside the county network. Then I cleared the browser history and logged out. I was halfway back to my desk when I saw Janet from HR walking toward me down the hallway. She stopped when she noticed me, her expression shifting to something that looked almost like pity. "Claire, do you have a minute?" I kept my face neutral. "Of course." She gestured to a nearby conference room. We stepped inside and she closed the door. She did not sit down. "I wanted to give you a heads up," she said quietly. "The Inspector General's office has expanded the scope of the investigation. They're looking into other approvals you processed over the past 2 years, not just the ones from July." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Why?" Janet hesitated. "They found additional irregularities. Small things but enough to raise questions. Vendor payments that don't match purchase orders. Fund transfers to organizations that don't have active contracts. It's adding up." I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't process those transactions. If there are irregularities, someone else created them using my credentials, just like the ones from July. She looked uncomfortable. "I believe you, Claire." "I do. But the evidence is stacking up and the leadership team is getting nervous. They're talking about placing you on administrative leave while the investigation continues." I stared at her. Administrative leave? That's basically an admission of guilt before they've proven anything. Janet's voice dropped. "I know, but they're under pressure. The county executive's office is involved now. They want this resolved quickly and quietly. If it drags on, it becomes a public relations problem." I could see where this was going. "They want me to resign." She did not deny it. "They haven't said that officially. But if you were to step down voluntarily, they would likely offer a severance package and a neutral reference. It would end the investigation and let you move on." I felt anger rising, hot and sharp. Move on to what? A resignation under investigation would destroy my career. No one would hire me. I'd be unemployable in this field. Janet met my eyes. "I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. I'm not saying it's fair." I took a breath and forced the anger down. "Thank you for the warning. But I'm not resigning. I didn't do anything wrong. And I'm not going to let them push me out to cover up their restructuring plan. Her expression changed slightly. What restructuring plan? I realized my mistake too late. I had said too much. Never mind. Forget I said that. She shook her head slowly. Claire, if you know something about why this is happening, you need to be careful. Accusing leadership of orchestrating a setup is not going to help your case. It's going to make you look paranoid. I wanted to argue, to show her the meeting schedules and the consulting firm and the timeline that lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. But I could see in her face that she did not want to know. She wanted to believe the system was working correctly, that investigations were impartial, that people like me only got accused when there was real evidence. Challenging that belief would make her complicit, and she was not willing to take that risk. Okay, I said quietly. Thank you for letting me know. She nodded and left the room. I stood there for a moment trying to steady myself. Administrative leave. Expanded investigation. Pressure from the county executive's office. They were accelerating the timeline. They were tightening the noose. I needed to move faster. I went back to my desk and called Marcus. He answered on the third ring. Claire, I was about to call you. We need to talk. I kept my voice low. What happened? He sounded tense. Someone accessed the server logs for your account. They pulled everything from the past 3 years. Access times, IP addresses, file downloads. Everything. I felt the dread settle deeper. Who accessed them? The request came from the Inspector General's office, but it was routed through an external IP. Someone outside the county network is looking at your data. I closed my eyes. Dr. Vivian Shah. She's a consultant working with Tom on the restructuring. She's the one feeding them information. Marcus was silent for a moment. If that's true, you need to go to someone higher up. You need to file a formal complaint. I laughed bitterly. Against who? The people investigating me are the same people who would receive the complaint. There's no higher authority I can trust. He sighed. Then you need to get a lawyer. A real one, not just advice. You need someone who can fight this on your behalf. I had been avoiding this conversation with myself for days. Lawyers were expensive. Good lawyers were prohibitively expensive. But I was running out of options. Do you know anyone? Marcus paused. I know someone who does employment law. Her name is Angela Torres. She's tough. I'll send you her contact information. He hesitated. Claire, be careful. If they're willing to go this far, they're not going to stop just because you fight back. They're going to hit harder. I thanked him and hung up. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then opened my banking app. I had $32,000 in savings. It had taken me years to build that cushion, years of careful budgeting and deferred expenses. A good lawyer could burn through it in weeks. I made the call anyway. Angela Torres answered on the second ring. Her voice was crisp and businesslike. I explained the situation as concisely as I could. The fraudulent transactions. The suspended access. The restructuring proposal. The external consultant with access to my server logs. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then she spoke. Ms. Harding, what you're describing is not just misconduct. It's coordinated retaliation. If we can prove that the investigation was initiated to justify your termination as part of a cost-cutting measure, you have grounds for a wrongful termination suit and possibly a whistleblower claim. I felt a flicker of hope. Can you help me? She did not sugarcoat it. I can try. But I need to be honest with you. Cases like this are hard to win. You're fighting an institution with resources and legal protections. Discovery will be expensive. Depositions will take months. And even if we win, the settlement might not cover your legal fees. I swallowed. What's your retainer? She named a figure. $5,000 just to start. I felt the hope flicker and dim. I'll need to think about it. Angela's tone softened slightly. I understand. But don't wait too long. The longer they control the narrative, the harder it becomes to fight back. I hung up and sat in the silence of my office. $5,000 to start. Tens of thousands more if it went to trial. I could afford it barely, but it would wipe out my savings. And if I lost, I would have nothing. No job, no savings, no future. I thought about Lily upstairs in the records office, trying to keep her head down and stay safe. I thought about the house I had worked so hard to buy, the mortgage payments I could not afford without a salary. I thought about the 11 years I had given to this place, the nights I had stayed late, the weekends I had sacrificed, the projects I had saved. None of it mattered now. None of it would protect me. I opened my email and saw a new message from Tom. The subject line read, "Meeting request." I opened it with a sense of inevitability. He wanted to see me in his office at 3 o'clock. The tone was formal, almost clinical. I knew what it was going to be. I spent the next 2 hours preparing. I printed every document I had. The transaction records. The medical files. The screenshots of the restructuring meetings. The email from Marcus confirming the external access to my server logs. I put them all in a folder and sealed it in an envelope. Then I wrote a short letter explaining everything and addressed it to the county ombudsman's office. I did not mail it. Not yet. But I wanted it ready. At 2:55, I walked to Tom's office. His assistant waved me in without a word. Tom was sitting behind his desk, his face carefully blank. Rebecca Martins was there too, standing near the window with her tablet. I felt my chest tighten. This was not a meeting. This was an ambush. Tom gestured to the chair across from him. "Claire, thank you for coming. Please sit down." I sat. I kept my hands folded in my lap so they would not shake. Rebecca spoke first. "Ms. Harding, we've completed the preliminary phase of the investigation. Based on the evidence we've gathered, we believe there is sufficient cause to recommend your termination for gross misconduct related to financial irregularities." I stared at her. "You haven't proven anything. You haven't shown that I committed fraud. You've only shown that my credentials were used." She did not blink. The burden of proof in an administrative proceeding is lower than in a criminal trial. The evidence shows a pattern of improper approvals processed under your authorization. Whether you actively participated or negligently allowed your credentials to be compromised, the result is the same. You are responsible. Tom leaned forward. "Claire, we're prepared to offer you a choice. You can resign effective immediately with a severance package equivalent to 3 months' salary and a neutral reference. Or we can proceed with formal termination proceedings, which will be on your permanent record and will likely result in no severance." I looked at him. I looked at Rebecca. I thought about everything I had uncovered. The restructuring plan, the consulting firm, the coordinated timeline, and I realized that none of it mattered. They had already decided. The investigation was a formality. The evidence was irrelevant. They wanted me gone, and they had built a justification that would satisfy the paperwork. Fighting them meant burning through my savings, risking Lily's position, and spending months or years in a legal battle I might not win. Accepting the offer meant walking away with something even if it was not justice. I thought about Angela Torres's words. The longer they control the narrative, the harder it becomes to fight back. I thought about the envelope on my desk, the letter I had not mailed. I thought about the system I had trusted, the rules I had followed, the competence I had built my identity around. All of it had failed me. I looked at Tom. "If I resign, do you guarantee that Lily's position is not affected?" He blinked. "Your niece? She's not part of this investigation." I kept my voice level. I wanted in writing a separate agreement stating that her employment status will not be impacted by my resignation. Tom exchanged a glance with Rebecca. "I don't think that's necessary." I did not move. "Then I don't resign. I fight this publicly. I file complaints with the Ombudsman, the County Board, and the State Labor Commission. I make sure everyone knows about the restructuring plan and Dr. Vivian Shaw's involvement." The room went very quiet. Rebecca's expression hardened. Tom's face flushed slightly. "That would be unwise, Claire. Making unfounded accusations will only damage your credibility further." I met his eyes. "Then give me the agreement. Put it in writing, and I'll sign the resignation." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned to Rebecca. "Draft an addendum. Confirm that Lily Harding's employment is not under review and will not be affected by this matter." Rebecca looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded. "I'll have it ready by end of day." Tom turned back to me. "You'll sign both documents on Monday morning." Until then, you're on administrative leave. Clear your desk and go home. I stood up. My legs felt unsteady, but I kept my face composed. I walked out of his office and back to my desk. I packed my personal items into a box. A framed photo of Lily. A coffee mug I had bought on a work trip to Denver. A small plant that had somehow survived years of neglect. The folder with the documents stayed on my desk. I did not need it anymore. I carried the box down to my car and sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the building I had worked in for 11 years. I felt hollow. Not angry, not sad, just empty. I had lost. Not because I was guilty, but because the system was designed to protect itself, not the people within it. I started the engine and drove home. Lily was sitting on the front steps when I arrived. She stood up when she saw the box. What happened? I set the box down and looked at her. I'm resigning. But you're safe. They're putting it in writing. Her face crumpled. No. You can't. You didn't do anything wrong. I sat down next to her on the steps. It doesn't matter. Fighting them would destroy both of us. This way you keep your job. You keep your future. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't want a future if it means you lose yours. I put my arm around her shoulders. You don't get to choose. I already made the decision. We sat there together as the sun set, the light fading from gold to gray to darkness. And for the first time since this started, I let myself cry. I did not sleep that weekend. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past 2 weeks, every decision I had made, every opportunity one had missed. By Sunday afternoon, I could not stand the confinement of my own thoughts anymore. I went downstairs and found Lily in the kitchen making coffee. She looked as exhausted as I felt. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her movements slow and mechanical. She glanced at me when I entered but did not speak. We had said everything there was to say on Friday night. Now we were just waiting for Monday morning, for the papers I would sign that would end my career and preserve hers. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table. The envelope I had prepared, the one addressed to the county ombudsman, was still sitting on the counter where I had left it. I had not mailed it. I had not destroyed it either. It sat there like a question I had not answered. Lily followed my gaze. Are you going to send it? I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. I don't know. What's the point? Even if the ombudsman investigates, it will take months. By then I'll be gone. The restructuring will be approved. Tom and his consulting firm will have one. She sat down across from me. So you just let them get away with it? I looked at her. What choice do I have? If I fight, I lose my severance. I burn through my savings on legal fees. I drag you into a public scandal. And at the end of it, maybe I prove that I was set up, but I still don't get my job back. The system doesn't work that way. Once you're marked as a problem, you stay marked. Lily shook her head. That's not the Claire I know. The Claire I know doesn't give up. She finds a way. I felt something crack inside me. Maybe the Claire you know doesn't exist anymore. Maybe she was just someone who believed the rules mattered. And now she knows better. Lily stared at me for a long moment. Then she stood up and walked out of the room. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, the sound of her bedroom door closing. I sat alone in the kitchen, the coffee growing cold in my hands. I thought about the life I had built, the career I had sacrificed for, the reputation I had earned. All of it was gone now, dismantled in 2 weeks by people who had decided I was an obstacle. And the worst part was that they were right. I had been an obstacle. My competence, my thoroughness, my refusal to cut corners had made me inconvenient. In a system that valued efficiency over accuracy, cost reduction over quality, I was a liability. I picked up the envelope and turned it over in my hands. Inside was everything I had discovered. The restructuring plan. The meeting schedules. The external consultant with access to my data. The fraudulent transactions that had been created to justify my removal. It was not enough to prove my innocence in a court of law, but it was enough to raise questions. It was enough to make people uncomfortable. It was enough to create doubt. I thought about what Angela Torres had said. The longer they control the narrative, the harder it becomes to fight back. I had let them control the narrative for 2 weeks. I had been reactive, defensive, focused on clearing my name instead of exposing theirs. I opened my laptop and started typing. I wrote a detailed account of everything that had happened, from the first email notification to the meeting in Tom's office. I included dates, names, screenshots, and documentation. The report covered the restructuring plan and Dr. Vivian Shaw's involvement, the fraudulent transactions and the cloned access card, the pressure on Lily and the offer to resign. I worked for 3 hours refining every sentence, checking every fact. When I finished, I had a document that was 12 pages long, single-spaced, formatted like a formal report. I titled it Retaliation and Fraud in the Regional Development and Grants Division. I saved it to my cloud drive. Then I opened my email and started composing a message. I addressed it to the county ombudsman, the county board of supervisors, the local press, and the state labor commission. I attached the report and the supporting documentation. In the body of the email, I wrote a short summary. I am a former employee of the county government who was forced to resign under threat of termination after refusing to cooperate with a fraudulent investigation designed to justify my removal as part of a cost-cutting restructuring plan. The attached report contains evidence of misconduct by senior leadership and an external consulting firm. I am making this information public because internal reporting mechanisms have failed. I read it 3 times. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. Once I sent this, there would be no severance package, no neutral reference, no quiet exit. There would be depositions and hearings and public scrutiny. Tom and Rebecca and Dr. Vivian Shaw would come after me with everything they had. They would paint me as a disgruntled employee, a conspiracy theorist, a liar. They would question my competence, my integrity, my sanity, and I would have to fight them in public with no salary and diminishing savings, while everyone I had worked with for 11 years watched from a distance. But I thought about the system that had failed me. I thought about the next person who would be targeted, the next obstacle who would be removed through fabricated evidence and coordinated pressure. I thought about Lily, who had wanted to fight but whom I had told to stay silent. I thought about the Claire I used to be, the one who believed that doing good work and following the rules would be enough. That Claire was gone. But maybe the person who remained could do something she never could. Maybe the person who remained could burn it all down. I hit send. The email disappeared from my outbox, and I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was done. I could not take it back. I stood up and walked upstairs. Lily's door was closed, but I knocked anyway. She opened it after a moment. Her face was streaked with tears, but when she saw my expression, she stopped. "What did you do?" I held up my phone, showing her the sent email. I sent the report. To everyone. The ombudsman, the board, the press, the labor commission. I sent everything. Her eyes widened. What about the severance? What about the agreement? I shook my head. There is no agreement now. They'll terminate me. They'll fight me. But at least people will know the truth. At least someone will ask questions. Lily stared at me. Then she started to cry again, but this time it was different. This time she was smiling through the tears. She threw her arms around me, and I held her tightly. "You're insane," she whispered. "You're completely insane." I laughed, a short, sharp sound that felt like relief. "Probably." She pulled back and looked at me. "What happens now?" I took a breath. "Now we wait. And we prepare for them to come after us." The response came faster than I expected. By Monday morning, my inbox was flooded with automated replies and forwarding notifications. By Monday afternoon, I had a voicemail from the county ombudsman's office requesting an interview. By Monday evening, a reporter from the local newspaper called asking for a statement. Tom sent me an email at 6 o'clock. The subject line read, "Immediate termination notice." I did not open it. I already knew what it said. On Tuesday, Angela Torres called. "Ms. Harding, I saw your report. It's making the rounds. The county is scrambling. They're claiming you falsified evidence and violated confidentiality agreements." I kept my voice steady. I didn't falsify anything. Everything in that report is documented. Angela paused. "I believe you, but you need to understand what you've done. You've declared war on an institution with significant resources and legal protections. They're going to come after you hard. They're going to try to discredit you, intimidate you, and exhaust you financially. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the $32,000 in my savings account. I thought about the mortgage payments I could not afford. I thought about the career I had already lost. I don't have a choice anymore. I'm already in it. Angela's tone shifted slightly. Then let's make sure you have a fighting chance. I'll take your case. My retainer is $5,000, but we'll work out a payment plan. And I'm going to file a motion for an injunction to prevent the county from retaliating further while the investigation is ongoing. I felt a flicker of hope. Thank you. She did not sugarcoat it. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be brutal. But if we can prove that the investigation was a pretext for retaliation, we can hurt them. We can make them settle. And we can make sure this doesn't happen to someone else. I hung up and sat in the silence of my living room. Lily was at work trying to keep her head down and stay invisible. I was unemployed, under attack, and facing a legal battle that could take years. But for the first time since this started, I felt like I was not just reacting. I was acting. I was taking control back, not of my job or my reputation, but of the narrative. I was forcing them to defend themselves instead of attacking me. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. The county ombudsman opened a formal investigation. The State Labor Commission requested documents. The newspaper published a story titled, "Former County Employee Alleges Retaliation and Fraud." The article was careful and factual, presenting my claims alongside the county's denial, but it raised questions that people could not ignore. Comment sections filled with speculation. Other employees, current and former, started coming forward with their own stories of pressure and misconduct. The restructuring plan, which had been quietly progressing through approval channels, was suddenly tabled pending review. Tom was placed on administrative leave. Dr. Vivian Shaw's consulting contract was suspended. Rebecca Martins gave a deposition in which she admitted that external parties had provided her with guidance on which transactions to flag. It was not a confession, but it was a crack in the facade. Angela filed a lawsuit on my behalf, claiming wrongful termination, retaliation, and defamation. The county offered to settle within a month. The offer was for $80,000, a neutral reference, and an agreement that my termination would be reclassified as a resignation due to restructuring. It was not vindication. It was not justice. But it was acknowledgement. It was the county admitting, in legal terms that would never be spoken aloud, that they had been wrong. I accepted the settlement. Angela took her fees, and I was left with enough to cover 6 months of mortgage payments and living expenses. I would need to find another job, and that would not be easy with a gap in my employment history and a reputation as someone who had fought back. But I had something I did not have before. I had proof that I had been right. I had documentation that the system had failed, and I had forced people to acknowledge it, even if they did it quietly and reluctantly. Lily kept her job. She was cautious and watched at first, but as the weeks passed and the scandal faded from the front pages, the scrutiny eased. She stayed in my house and we rebuilt a kind of normalcy, though it was different now. We both knew how fragile institutions were, how easily they could be weaponized against individuals who became inconvenient. On a Saturday morning in late November, I sat on my front steps with a cup of coffee and watched the neighborhood wake up. The air was cold and sharp, the sky a pale gray that promised rain. I thought about the Claire who had opened that email 3 months ago, the one who had believed that competence and documentation would protect her. That Claire was gone. The person who remained was harder, warier, less trusting. She knew that the rules only mattered if the people in power decided to follow them. She knew that fighting back came with a cost, and sometimes you paid it even when you won. But she also knew that silence had a cost too. She had seen what happened when people stayed quiet, when they accepted the narrative they were given, when they let institutions protect themselves at the expense of individuals. And she had decided that speaking up, even when it hurt, was better than disappearing without a trace. I finished my coffee and went back inside. There were job applications to fill out, interviews to prepare for, a future to rebuild from scratch. It would not be easy. It would not be fair. But it would be mine. And that I thought was enough.